بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين
اللهم صل على محمد.
Dear elders, brothers in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I know that an announcement went out yesterday that I'm going to give a short talk on kidney failure or kidney health, but I'm going to give you an option. I can either talk about kidney failure or kidney health, or I can talk about the physical and mental benefits of fasting, because the month of Ramadan is just around the corner. So you decide what you want me to talk about. Should I talk about kidney health or should I talk about fasting?
I can start with early in the morning.
Fasting, is it?
Afternoon, then background.
Okay, fantastic.
Sorry,
So I will start with fasting, and then if we have some time, then I will touch very briefly on kidney disease. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Holy Quran, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Ya ayyuhal ladina amanu, O you who believe, Kutiba alaykum as-siyam, fasting has been prescribed for you. So pay attention to this word, prescribed. Fasting has been prescribed for you. Kutiba alaykum as-siyam kama kutiba ala alladhina min qablik, as it was prescribed to those who were before you. La'allakum tattaqun, so that you may attain taqwa, God consciousness, God awareness, so that you may reach a level where you can perceive the presence of Allah. When we are unwell, when there is something wrong with ourselves, physically or mentally, we go to a healthcare professional, to a doctor or to a practice nurse, and that particular healthcare professional prescribes medication for you. So the context of the word prescription here is being unwell, so that something is given to you, you are advised to take something in order to make you well. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says fasting has been prescribed for you. Why? Because throughout the year we gather a lot of spiritual impurities, spiritual toxins, poisons accumulate in our body. So at the time of Ramadan, fasting has been prescribed for us. Prescribed, why us? Why do we have to stay without food and water for so many hours? So Allah is reassuring us. He says, no. It was also prescribed for those people who were before you. It's not only you, I'm not picking on you. Even those who came before you had to undergo through this spiritual purification, detoxification. Why? Allah is saying, so that you may attain taqwa. So over the years, over the whole year, the span of a year, we become spiritually impure to a point where taqwa within us, taqwa lessens. And therefore, in the month of Ramadan, Allah prescribes fasting for us, and it is mandatory. You have to take it. It's like if somebody is a diabetic and the blood sugar is high, you have to take medication. If diet cannot control it, it is mandatory. If you don't take it, your blood sugar will be high. It's a fact. If somebody has got a high blood pressure problem, hypertension, if you don't take medication, the blood pressure will be high. So it is a must. You have to take the medication. Similarly, you have to fast. In order to purify yourself spiritually, you have to fast. There is no shortcut. So fasting is mandatory. And the end result of fasting, if done properly, in the way it should be done, it is that you attain taqwa, God consciousness, God awareness. You perceive the presence of God every moment in your life. So this is the essence of fasting, the reason why we have been told to fast. So the main purpose of fasting is to improve our spiritual health. That's the main purpose. But incidentally, fasting has got some physical benefits as well, some physical health benefits as well. And we will touch on these physical benefits after as-salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
اللهم صل على محمد.
So before I talk about fasting, I want to talk about how our body produces energy in a normal way. So when we eat food, so inshallah after this talk, we are going to have some nice breakfast. Inshallah. So when we have food, most of the food, especially the carbohydrates that we consume, carbohydrate means rice, naan, chapati, bread, wheat. These are carbohydrates, potatoes for example. Those are broken down in our body to glucose. Glucose is the fuel on which our body runs. Without glucose, our body cannot function. Our brain uses 100 grams of glucose every minute, because it is the most active part of our body. And because I'm a kidney specialist, I will say that the kidneys are also one of the most active parts of our body, because they keep filtering blood. Even when you are awake, when you are asleep, your kidneys continue to work. So the whole body is in a constant state of functioning, of action. And it needs a nutrient that can easily be broken down and energy can be produced. So glucose is that nutrient. So when we have food, the carbohydrates in the food are broken down and the end product is glucose. Now glucose, in order to produce energy, has to enter inside the cells of our body. Okay? It cannot enter inside the cells. So what happens is that our body produces a hormone called insulin. Insulin takes the glucose and escorts it inside the cell. Once the glucose enters the cell, it is then broken down and energy is produced. And the cells then function. The brain is not entirely dependent on insulin. It does need insulin to a certain extent, but it is not entirely dependent on insulin. It will continue to use glucose. So when we eat food, normally what happens? Our body starts producing insulin, and within an hour to 2 hours, our blood levels of insulin rise and they peak. And after some time, it goes back down again. Now, when your insulin level rises, two things happen. One, your blood glucose level goes down because the glucose from your blood is now entering into the cells. So your blood glucose level goes down. Secondly, your body starts making more fat. Insulin encourages the production of fat, and it discourages the breakdown of fat. So the fat that is already stored in your body is not broken down, and there is more fat that is stored in your body. Fat is a storage form of energy. So when there is excess energy in your body, which your body does not require, it is stored as fat. Okay, so for example, if I have a nice plate of nihari, which has got a lot of oil, and I have it with butter naan, for example, that's a lot of carbohydrates and oil, isn't it? And fat. That has got a lot of calories. But after I eat the nihari and the naan, I go to sleep because I'm very sleepy. All the blood in my body is now concentrating in my tummy to digest the food. So I feel sleepy and I go to sleep. Now I have not used the calories that I have taken in. So those excess calories that I am not using have to go somewhere. So the body says, no problem, I will store it and I will use it when the need arises. The problem is I don't exercise, so the need never arises. So all those excess calories are stored as fat. And that's why people's weight goes up. My weight will go up and I will become overweight because I'm not using those excess calories. So when insulin levels go up, more fat is stored and less fat is broken down. So that is normal. Now, what happens in a fasting state? Let's say somebody does not get food and is now deprived of food for many, many hours. So because there is no food, there is no glucose, right? Because the body does not have any glucose. So what happens? The body is forced to break down fat and protein, and it forms an alternative source of energy instead of glucose, and that source of energy is called ketones. Ketones are chemicals that are produced in the body as an alternative to glucose, and they are not as effective as glucose, and they can be a bit acidic as well, so they increase the acid levels of the body. So that whole process is called ketosis. Ketosis is a process where your body produces an alternative source of energy called ketones. This is very typically seen in type 1 diabetics, those diabetic patients who are dependent on insulin. So what happens in type 1 diabetes is exactly what happens to a thirsty person when he is in the middle of the ocean. If you are in the middle of the sea and you are thirsty, there is water all around you, but can you drink the water? No. Why? Because it is too salty. It can't go inside you, isn't it? The more water you will drink, the more thirsty you will become. In type 1 diabetes, your body has got abundant glucose as the source of energy, as the fuel. The problem is there is no insulin to escort the glucose into the cell. So in essence, that patient or that individual is in a state of fasting. So what will happen over time? That patient's body will start producing ketones as an alternative source of energy, because glucose cannot be used. So the body will feel that I am fasting. So those who are type 1 diabetics typically are very thin people, because over time the body starts breaking down fat and protein. So muscle mass is broken down. So their muscles are very flabby, they have no fat on their body, skin and bones. And when they become very unwell, when the blood sugar level continues to rise to an extent that they are so unwell they have to come to A&E, sometimes when we go near them, we know that they have got ketosis because their breath has got a characteristic fruity smell. It smells like fruit. Because those ketones can sometimes be excreted through the breath. You can smell the ketones. So when you don't have glucose, your body produces ketones. Are we clear? This is normally how our body operates when we eat and in a state of fasting. Now we come to the benefits of fasting. So a lot of research studies have been done as far as benefits of fasting is concerned. And on the other hand, a different population has been studied, a population which has got enough access to food and has an unhealthy diet without exercise. And then it is compared to the population that fasts. In this world currently, we have an epidemic, or you can say a pandemic. The word pandemic is now very common, isn't it, in the context of COVID-19. But there is another pandemic going on. Can anybody tell me what is this pandemic? It's been going on for many years now.
Obesity.
Huh?
Obesity.
Obesity, increased weight. There is a pandemic. 2/3 of adults in the United Kingdom are above their ideal weight, are either overweight or obese. And 1/3 of our children. It's a big number. Can you imagine the state of the health of the British population 10 or 15 years down the line if this state remains? It's going to be horrible. The NHS spends billions and billions of pounds every year to treat obesity related conditions, diabetes, type 2 diabetes, hypertension, kidney disease, sleep problems. When you have an excess content of fat in your body, that causes resistance to insulin. So the fat cells do not respond to insulin. So if you are eating any carbohydrates and it is digested and you have the end product of glucose, and you want to use that glucose, when your body starts producing insulin, if the body has got a lot of fat, insulin won't work. It doesn't work on fat cells. So now you have high levels of insulin and high levels of glucose and high levels of fat. That is type 2 diabetes, where the body has insulin resistance. So the higher the level of insulin, the more the fat is produced. The more the fat, the more the insulin resistance. The more the insulin resistance, the more the body produces insulin, because it wants the glucose to be used. So you enter into a vicious cycle. 2/3 of our population is obese, and 1/3 of the children in the UK are obese. That is very serious. A research study was done to look at the children specifically to see what group of children were obese. If I were to ask you that I'm dividing children attending schools into 2 groups. First group are those who have got well-to-do parents, rich parents or well-to-do parents financially. And second group are the deprived group. Which group do you think will be more obese? The rich people. The answer is no.
Deprived.
Paradoxically, it is the deprived group. Why?
Junk food.
Why junk food? Cheap. Cheap. I was once having a chat with one of our dialysis nurses during our break. And I asked her, I said, you're working 12-hour shifts 3 to 4 times a week. Okay? How are you managing to cook at home? Because you're so tired. It's a continuous work from 7 o'clock in the morning to 7 p.m. You only have 2 breaks. During COVID, I did a nursing shift on ICU. I worked as a nurse. And I thanked my stars that I'm a doctor, because nurses do a lot of work. I was continuously on my toes. I got one break which was half an hour and another break which was about 40 minutes in the 12-hour shift. That was it. So that nurse told me that it's very simple. When I go home, I either buy something from McDonald's, which is what, £2.50, or I make pot noodles for my family. You know those ready-made noodles you get in supermarkets where you just add hot water. So either I make pot noodles or I buy something from Asda. Khalas, my work is done. We have a meal and we go to sleep. So the deprived children who are from a deprived background, economically deprived background, have higher rates of obesity and weight problems compared to children who are coming from a financially sound background. Secondly, most people from a financially sound background have parents who are more, usually, not in all circumstances, usually educated parents who have got good awareness about their health. Number three, those parents will be spending extra money to enroll their children into physically active activities, okay, like football, for example, volleyball, tennis, etc., etc. So children from a financially sound background are less obese compared to those from a deprived background. So this is the challenge that this country is facing, and not only this country, every other country in the world. We are now a global village. If you go to Africa, so in Tanzania, the easiest food you can get is chips, fries on the road. Easy. You'll see so many, especially in cities, in the urban areas, you'll see so many indigenous Africans now having chips. So this, because it's easy to get and it's relatively cheap, it's not expensive. Now when we come to fasting, there are many research studies that have been done. And there was one paper that was published in a journal. I have it here with me on a PowerPoint, but unfortunately we don't have AV facilities. I would have shown you the paper. But I will highlight the advantages of fasting that were researched and that were published in the paper. Okay, this was published in 2017 in a diabetes journal. So the authors of this paper say that when you restrict yourself, when you do caloric restriction, when you restrict yourself from food and you have documented weight loss, it is now accepted in the scientific community that it increases your lifespan. It causes longevity. You live more. And a research study was done amongst mice. So they took mice in the lab and they divided mice into two groups. The first group was deprived of food for a certain number of hours every day, and the other group was given to eat as much as they wanted to eat. And they found out that that group of mice who was fasting lived 30% more than the group of mice who could eat whenever they wanted to eat. So fasting, if done in the right way, okay, there's a caveat. If done in the right way, increases your lifespan. Number one. Number two, fasting regulates your body systems. It encourages cells that are no longer in use to die, and it removes the dead cells. So in our body, our cells have to die. If they don't die, you get cancer. Cancer is uncontrolled multiplication of cells of any group. If it's blood cells, blood cancer. If it's prostate cells, prostate cancer. If it's cells within the intestines, colon cancer. Cancer is uncontrolled multiplication of cells, and those cells don't die. They just keep multiplying. Our body has a catch mechanism. And that is called, the term that is used is called apoptosis. It means programmed cell death. So the moment a new cell is produced in your body, it is already programmed to die. So mouth is haq. We will die, but our cells die every day. And that is a lesson to us. The day I was born, I was programmed to die at a certain time. All of us are programmed to die. These cells are programmed to die. When we fast, that whole system of cell death is streamlined, and the time the cell dies, those dead cells are not accumulating in our body, and fasting encourages removal of those cells. This is documented in research. And the last advantage of fasting is fasting does not cause malnutrition. It does not cause deficiencies of vitamins and important nutrients. Why? Because fasting is only temporary. Ayyaman ma'aduda. That's the term used in the Holy Quran, in Surah Al-Baqarah. It is only for a limited number of days. And look at the mercy of Allah. He says, you are traveling, don't fast. You are unwell, don't fast. You are too old and frail, you cannot tolerate fasting, really, don't fast. No problem. This is the mercy of Allah. So this research shows that fasting does not cause malnutrition because it is only for a limited number of days. Further research has also shown that fasting regulates our hormone systems. So this whole insulin spike that comes and goes, and this accumulation of fat is also regulated, provided iftar is done in the proper way. Okay? So I keep saying provided because we know how we behave during the month of Ramadan. And I don't know about you, but certainly I need to improve the way I behave. Okay? So this is a wake-up call for me. What about mental function, brain function? So this research study in mice showed one thing. The group of mice who were made to fast, when they were put in a maze, so these mice are put in a maze, they have to find their own way and reach a destination. The group of mice that were fasting could navigate the maze faster and more efficiently than the group of mice that could eat at their will. And they found out, theoretically they extrapolated, that when your body starts producing ketones as the alternative source of energy, and your brain starts using the ketones, the cells in your brain become more resilient. So what happens when we learn something, when we want to think and when we learn something? When we learn something new, our brain cells form a connection between each other. So let's say today, inshallah, I hope and pray that you have learned something new. Now when you learn something new, your brain cells will form a connection. And that connection can be permanent. When you want to recall that piece of information, you recall that connection that is formed. When you are fasting and your brain starts using ketones, the connection that is formed when you learn something is a more robust connection, and it is more resilient compared to when you use glucose. That is the precise reason, I think so, why Imam Ali alayhi salam in one of his sayings, Imam Ali said, ilm happens when you are hungry, on an empty stomach. And if you look at our ulama, especially ulama who are there, very prominent ulama, and those who were in the recent past, you study how they lived their lives in the Hawza, you will note that they had serious problems and challenges with food. If I am not mistaken, it was Marhum Ayatullah Khui, or one of his contemporaries, who when asked said, we did not have money, so when we were hungry, we used to go to the garbage dump in Najaf and eat from watermelon skins that were thrown. When people finish eating watermelon and they throw, whatever little watermelon is left, we used to eat that from the skin. That's how these people reach that status of ilm. So a person's mental function improves, learning experience improves with hunger. I was very hesitant in accepting this fact because of my own personal experience. When I'm hungry, I can't study. And if I want to read, I can't read properly. But when I remember that over a period of time, when you're into fasting and your body gets used to fasting, and all these symptoms of headaches and body pains and mood swings. Towards the end of Ramadan, your body sort of stabilizes. In the beginning of Ramadan, people don't want to talk to each other. Everybody is in a bad mood. But once your body stabilizes and you start reading, you will realize the difference of learning when it comes to learning with an empty stomach or learning with a full stomach. And when we attend conferences, I was at a conference yesterday and I actually noted after lunch, half of the audience had already fallen asleep. Okay, because all the blood goes into the stomach to digest the food. So there is less blood going to the brain. So these are some of the health benefits of fasting. So I will end my talk here and I will open the floor to questions. So if there's any question, if I can answer, I will try my best to answer. Yes, Hassan Uncle raised his hand and then...
My
yes.
question is this thing. According to my lifestyle, usually what happens, in the morning I take a breakfast, right? In between something we eat, but not much, something snacks or some sandwiches. I remain hungry, not taking any heavy lunch in between. And then when I go home and say 5, 6, 7, 8 o'clock, we eat dinner. Now this dinner what we eat, soon after the dinner, after an hour, we go to sleep. You see, now what my question is this healthy, because, stomach is full and you are going to sleep. So you are making the whole body to stop functioning, and so the food inside the body stays and it ferments. It starts creating another shape, or the another type of. So this thing which I found that what I should do after that dinner, should I go for a walk to digest these things, or should I sit and watch television?
So when we start eating, when we finish eating, what happens is that our stomach and our intestines, they move and they churn. They squeeze and they churn the food that we have eaten. And they produce chemicals called enzymes that digest the food. Our stomach has got acid. The pH of the hydrochloric acid that is in our stomach is 3 or less than 3. That means if I take the acid from the stomach and I put it in your hand, it will burn through your hand. That is the acid in the stomach. Okay? So that acid and the enzymes digest food. The whole process of digestion can take 4 to 6 hours. 4 to 6 hours. It does not finish in an hour. It does not finish in 2 hours. If we are sitting and if we are active, the process of digestion is active. If we are physically active, the body wants to digest the food faster to produce energy. If we are not physically active, over a long period of time, the digestive system also slows down. And because we overload it with food, especially food like protein, for example, meat takes longer to digest. When you have fruits and vegetables, that is easy for the body for your GI tract to digest. Now, when it comes to having dinner at night, it is important to have an early dinner. Health-wise, do not have dinner at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock and then go to sleep immediately. Your body does not require food at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock. What is the sole purpose of eating? The purpose of eating is so that you produce energy from the food which your body can use. That's why we eat, isn't it? If you are eating and then immediately after that you want to go to sleep, all those calories, as I mentioned earlier, will be stored because they are not used and they will be stored as fat. it is important to have an early dinner around 6 o'clock, 6 or 7 o'clock. After that, you can do an activity at home. You can go for a short walk. There are no, there is no research study that was done to show 100% that walking after dinner is healthy. But we do know for a fact that having a simple dinner with simple food, not filling yourself up, is healthy. Because at night your body does not require that level of energy. In the morning, if you are a laborer, for example, a manual laborer, you are lifting things physically, you are walking long distances, you are running, you are doing things which are manually, you are using a lot of calories. At that time, if you want to have a heavy breakfast, it is understood because you will use those calories. But towards the end of the day, your meal should be very simple, and it is advised to have an early meal. Number one. Number two, the other aspect that you touched is having snacks in between. I remember that I was speaking to a dietitian a few years ago, and the dietitian told me, how can you fast? It's very important for you to have some snack around 10 o'clock, around 11 o'clock, and then have a healthy lunch, and then have another snack at 4 o'clock. Now, the understanding is totally different. Now we have a concept of intermittent fasting. People who fast for 12 hours, 14 hours, 16 hours. I met somebody in Dar es Salaam last year who fasts from 10 o'clock at night up until 6 o'clock in the evening the next day. He has, the people, they drink tea, they drink coffee without sugar, they drink water, but no juice, nothing that has got sugar in it. Just plain water or tea or coffee without sugar. And they eat as much as they want to eat between 6 p.m. and 10 p.m. And he has actually documented significant weight loss, and he has been successful. There is this concept of intermittent fasting. So no, you do not need snacks. And a patient who does not have other health conditions, I'm talking about a patient who is a person who is normal, who does not have diabetes, who does not have other conditions, and wants to do intermittent fasting. Okay? So that's the answer. Him and then you. Mustafa, yes.
So Dr. Mubarak, we live in a system that whether you like it or not, even if you go towards eating healthy diet, you will still end up with problems because the whole system is designed for us to fall ill. I'll give you some examples. If you look at the fruits and vegetables, right? Have you seen how they are sprayed with pesticides? Do you think the glyphosate pesticides are good for the human body? No. So that's one. Two, even if you look at our as simple foods as our bread. So even if you avoid junk food, if you look at our bread, the bread itself has ended up with GM soy. If you look at the feed that the animals are given, again it's genetically modified. So whether indirectly or directly, we'll end up either not. If you don't get obese, we'll get cancer. One. Two, if you're saying the NHS is spending billions of pounds in treating diabetes and such, wouldn't that be better spent in preventing it? Because spending billions, we're just making the drug companies richer. We're not doing anything to prevent. So I'll give another example. HSB, Hazrat Sultan Bahut Trust, 2 months ago came to do a workshop. The government paid them to come and talk about superficially to do this for them. So one of the questions that came up is, they're spending lots of money in treating, but there is nothing going on in the community. If I want to go and see a GP just now, they won't see me face to face. And if I do by chance get to see face to face, there's a time limit. No, you can only talk about one problem and only the symptoms, and we'll give you a pill, prescription will go straight there. There is no talk about diet change. My brother-in-law just now asking, my mother, she had diabetes, whatever, drug-related diabetes. There was no talk about how to change your diet, no education, no, straight away. શું છે ડાયાબિટીસની તમે કેવું પ્રિસ્ક્રાઇબ કરો છો દવા?
Metformin.
મેટફોર્મિન સ્ટ્રેટ અવે ડબલ ને કામ ના આવે તો ડબલ ને એ કામ ના આવે તો મમને ઝાયક્લોન પકડાવતા જાય. So there is no preventative. For 10-12 years there was no okay આમ કરો try કરો. So there is nothing going on. It's just gimmick. So two things. The third thing that this is I want to talk about because this I've seen it witnessed. So I work for NHS for a group of children's centers. It's not clinical, it's a reporting side. So we had a couple of staff in our nursery. They were very, very consistent, productive. Suddenly their sickness levels went up and down. So we know when you have more than a couple of sickness, we do a back to work interview. So it turned out that this staff child suddenly had formed a 3.5-year-old type 1 diabetes. Straight up, completely needed insulin. They couldn't cope at home. She wasn't obese. They couldn't cope at home. They had to be, the parents had to be taught how to put insulin. The nursery couldn't take her because none of the staff were trained. That was one. So I said, that doesn't make sense. There's no diabetes in the history. The parents are slim. They eat healthy.
In regards to the general point about prevention, and you touched about diet, you touched about how our life has been engineered in a way where the food that we eat is not healthy. A lot of your concerns, in fact most of your concerns are valid. It's difficult to advise on avoiding fruits and vegetables, presumably because they have been sprayed with pesticides. And I agree that this is a major concern. I don't know the figures of, when it comes to the food, the fruits and vegetables that we see in our market. But I certainly know that they are genetically engineered. So for example, we have grapes which are seedless. That's not natural, isn't it? Naturally, grapes should have seeds. It's difficult. The only thing I can advise you in that context is to try and have fruits and vegetables which are as organic as possible. So there are places where people farm in their own farms at a small scale level, and they come and sell their produce, and they claim to do it in an organic way. How can we ascertain that? I don't know. Regarding general community preventative strategies for non-communicable diseases like diabetes and hypertension and kidney disease, there is an arm of the government that is working on prevention, because the government cannot sustain spending so much money through the NHS at the moment. So one of the strategies that the government is doing, for example, is it has introduced a sugar tax. So now sugary drinks that are sold in the supermarkets are subject to a sugar tax in order to discourage people from buying those sodas or juice or etc. How effective that is, I don't know.
Because they've replaced sugar with aspartame and
Yes.
which equally have got more problems.
Has got more problem.
Goes
So
to their blood-brain barriers. So
Yes.
it's tough to get.
So it boils down to prevention strategies at the household level, and that is the reason why we have these discussions, to try and raise awareness and try and encourage each other to lead a healthy lifestyle. Our lifestyle is extremely busy, okay? If I take my example, and I'm sure your example is not much different, I go to work at 7:30 in the morning. I come back after 12 hours and I'm extremely tired and I don't have the energy to exercise. But in that state, I have to find time to exercise. I have to. There is no shortcut. I know I come back at 7 o'clock and then I get a phone call from the mosque, from Jamaat. There is this meeting and there is that meeting and this has happened and that has happened. It's a continuous cycle. But in that busy day, 24-hour day, I tell my patients this: find 20 to 30 minutes for your own body out of the 24 hours that you use. I remember when I joined medical school, My first day in medical school, our professor came and said, "You all want to become doctors?" And we were all sitting in the lecture theater. We were all excited, we are in medical school now. And we all said yes. He said, "Well, you have to do one thing. Every human being on earth has got 24 hours in a day. You have got 25 hours. You have to find that extra 1 hour yourself." So I tell my patients that find those 20 to 30 minutes. And it doesn't have to be every single day. It can be every other day. But find those 20 to 30 minutes and exercise. And try and raise awareness amongst your friends and relatives. The other thing you touched upon was type 1 diabetes. And I know I'm conscious of time because Mehboob Uncle has told me about time. Type 1 diabetes is different from type 2 diabetes. It does not happen in patients who are obese. But we do not know the exact cause of type 1 diabetes. We do know, however, that it is an autoimmune condition. It means that the body produces chemicals to attack its own self. There are many diseases that are autoimmune. Sometimes, so our body is designed to differentiate between itself and something from outside. So if I get an infection, a virus or a bacteria, the body will mount a response and try and kill that bacteria. Sometimes the body cannot differentiate between something that is foreign and with something that is from in its own self. And you get conditions called autoimmune diseases. There are a lot of diseases that are autoimmune diseases. Type 1 diabetes is one of them. Whether or not the MMR vaccine or other vaccines cause problems is a matter of a lot of debate. There has been research that shows that there are certain vaccines that cause problems. At the same time, there is research that shows that that research was not done in a proper way, or the data is not convincing, and there is counter research as well. So regarding vaccines causing type 1 diabetes, there have been anecdotal reports and they have been published, but we are still yet to see widespread data and research study that identifies any particular vaccine. I signed the consent form for my own son to get MMR vaccine 2 days ago, because I'm convinced that the MMR vaccine is safe, and that's why I'm happy for my own children to have that. But it is a matter of debate, and I can't comment much on it at this juncture.
You know, you're a nephrologist. We don't have that. How much of the kidney failures are a result of drug use? Not drugs, but products like remdesivir. We've seen peer-reviewed papers where it's increasing lots of kidney failures. So I've seen peer-reviewed journals and I've seen research. In your real life experience, how much have you seen?
So remdesivir is a treatment we give to COVID patients in our hospital. Okay. Personally, I am not very convinced that remdesivir works in COVID patients because I have given it to COVID patients, and I have not seen it improving their COVID status. But I have not seen a single patient with remdesivir-induced kidney failure. Not a single patient. And none of my colleagues have seen it, because we meet every week and we compare our notes. But none of my colleagues have seen it where I work, and even in Queen Elizabeth Hospital. So far we haven't seen. But there are medicines that predispose you to get kidney failure. Medicines like strong painkillers, for example, ibuprofen, naproxen. You can take them, even I take ibuprofen, but you have to be very, very careful. We kidney doctors hate ibuprofen or naproxen. These are strong painkillers, and they may predispose you to get kidney disease in certain conditions, like when you have diarrhea, vomiting, when you become unwell, when you have an infection. So you make sure that you don't take these strong painkillers at that point in time. And when you do take ibuprofen, make sure you drink a lot of water. Let's meet after the...
Your time is up, so you can't talk anymore.
Yes.
But I just want to comment. We are lucky today. We have not got only a doctor, but we have got an EC member. So the advantage with that is, so now we can push for Niaz to be a bit earlier, 7 than 9 after program.
Inshallah.
Salawat Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. Thank you very much, doctor. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Inshallah,
Thank
we
you.
can
Salawat
continue
Muhammad wa Ali
talking over
Muhammad.
there. Allahumma salli